I want to jump right into this, man. So pick up where you left off. This was back in like, what, 96, I want to say?
Yeah, I was...
So paint the picture for those maybe who don't remember.
Well, Boulder, Colorado. It's this little country town in Colorado. Used to be, at least, back in the 90s. Not a lot happens there. And I remember specifically when the news of JonBenet, who's this beautiful little 7-year-old girl, was in pageants and things of this nature, was found dead in her house. She was found hung in her house, and it was very, very devastating to not only the family but the community, because that sort of stuff just never happened there.
Who found her?
A family member did, and yeah, it was very bizarre. It was very odd. It was, this very, pretty little girl just found hung in her home, and no one knew who had done it. So the investigation began. And the investigation went on for, God, it was months, maybe a little over a year. And, the police department was acquiring evidence, and not a lot was known about what was going on with the investigation. And nothing came about. There was no charges brought. There was no convictions. There was no trials. There was no nothing. It just kind of, and I remember it just kind of fell by the wayside, and kind of forgot about it. And then just recently, there was these, after the 20-year anniversary, these shows on TV about JonBenet. And a lot of these things that the police department and the district attorney had done came to light. And it floored me. And my wife, who's also an attorney, loves these sort of things. It floored her with what had transpired in this investigation. Because there was ample evidence. And by ample evidence, I mean the police department, the Boulder Police Department, actually hired a third-party investigator to assist with their investigation. And they had evidence, and they presented this evidence to the district attorney in Boulder. And the evidence pointed towards JonBenet's brother. And the district attorney refused to prosecute, refused to bring charges.
How old was the brother?
He was a few years older, and he was special needs. I believe he was diagnosed with autism or Asperger's or something like that.
Okay.
But
was he high functioning? I don't remember that detail of the story.
He was high functioning, but he did have special needs.
Okay.
But there's also the backstory to this. The JonBenet Ramsey, or the Ramsey family, is that they were extremely wealthy.
Right.
They were one of the most wealthy families in Boulder, as I can recall. And I think that's an important fact in this entire segment here, is that money, in my opinion, can manipulate the system. It can manipulate justice. Because I think, when you have the money, like with OJ.
I was just going to say, man, this was Yeah,
and it was happening around the same time. It didn't get the press that OJ did, and the reason that I remember this is because I was there. I was actually a freshman in college when it all went down, but I was still in Colorado. And it just demonstrated to me when I was seeing these shows that money manipulates the system. And I think it always has. It's like almost, if you have the money, you can get justice. But again, I mean, what is justice? Justice is the seeking of truth, and money can manipulate that truth, which is, in my opinion, terrifying. So, at the risk of kind of going into the rabbit hole a little bit here, I don't know if I'm like most listeners in Truth Nation right now, but I don't remember the story well enough to be able to even sort of have enough vestige in taking a side on this one way or another. What were some of the things that were brought up in the 20-year anniversary show that you and your wife watched that made your blood curl? I think the biggest one was the DNA sample that they found on JonBenet.
And this is back when DNA was legitimate.
Yeah.
Right? It had been legitimized inside the court system.
Correct.
And wasn't like too early to kind of, I don't know this fancy technology, right? It was legit at that time.
It was legit, and it was brought to the district attorney's office, who did nothing with it. There is also this third-party investigator. Mm-hmm. We were watching this, and the district attorney's office actually went in and got a court order to basically quash or to gag. It's called a gag order to prohibit this third-party investigator from presenting this evidence in any way, shape, or form to the press, to the DA, to the public defender if they were ever hired. They could not bring it. And I remember my wife and I were watching this, and it was like we looked at each other. It's like, can they actually do that? Can the government, the DA, who is the government official, go in and actually suppress evidence that way? And apparently they can, and they did. So yeah, those were two of the biggest. When I heard that or saw that, I was just like, wow! I couldn't believe it.
What was the motive? What?
And again, I think it goes back to the money. It goes back to who you're dealing with. I mean, again, the Ramsey family was, and I think still are. Well, no, I take that back. He's not. I remember they got divorced shortly thereafter. But they were one of the most prominent families in Boulder, and I think they had influence. I think they had money. And, I mean, again...
But like in the OJ thing, not to slow your roll here, but like the money was in the defense.
Correct.
Right? So what I'm hearing you say is that the prosecutorial, like the DA side, was the one that suppressed.
But I think it was used to defend and basically defend the son, the brother, who, I mean, again, this is all speculation. I'm just speculating.
But that's the beauty of this,
exactly.
Right? You get to play Monday morning quarterback.
Exactly. But I think the parents, I mean, this is just my opinion. The parents used their wealth, their influence, their connections to basically protect their son. And again, it goes to the money manipulating the system.
So as the lay in this conversation, what I'm kind of picking up is that the family had already lost one child, and maybe the evidence was starting to mount towards the brother, being the prime suspect in this. And so somehow in some twisted rationale, they used their influence to basically just squash the momentum that was kind of going in that direction so that they could save their other child.
And I think that's an excellent way of putting it, because what wouldn't we do? I know you're a father, I'm a father. What wouldn't we do for our children? There's nothing. We would lay our lives down for our children. So if we had the power to protect them, having lost one already, would we do it? I mean, is that a justification for misconduct? Absolutely not. And again, this is all just speculation. But yeah. I think, would I do that if I was in a similar situation?
God, what a deal, man! God, not to go non sequitur on this, but it just conjures up that recent scenario where the father of that radical Islamist son.
Yeah.
And I forget what the thing was, but it was recent where he turned him in.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was just like a couple months back or something like that. Like, what a patriot.
Yeah.
Like that's incredible. Like you said, man, you'd lay down everything, including your life, for your kids. Like, what a position to be put in as a family where you almost have to like take what's still alive, right? I mean, that thing, you're still living this life, right? Carrying that forward, or the honor of your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
How do you, I mean, you can't weigh that.
No, impossible.
Impossible. It's like, how do you choose one child over another? You can't. So, again, do I justify any misconduct by the parents if there was any? And again, it's speculation. Of course not. But I mean, how do you can't rationalize that type of situation.
So what's the truth, right? This is Truth Radio. Like, it's 20 years removed now. The charge of the story is gone. But what's the collateral that's carried forward for our lesson today?
Again, I think it's the same lesson that's always been there, and that money can manipulate the outcome. Money can manipulate the system. Money can manipulate justice. And justice is, the seeking of truth. But again, what is truth? It's in the eye of the beholder. It's all about perception. And you can manipulate that if you have the means. So...
Cryptic, man.
Good stuff.
Gang, what say you about this? I'm curious. By the way, we're you can find us over on the socials. You can tweet us up. We're at Truth Radio ESPN if you want to send something over. If you want to weigh in on this or anything we got going coming up, you can even call in old school while. It's 858-202-0034 if you want to ask my man Kevin Cadora a question live. We'll get it asked live. But, gang, let's do this. I don't know how else to bookend that, so let's just do this. Coming up, We're going to switch gears right now. This is actually the story I wanted to lead with, just because I've actually watched this. Have you seen the Netflix series Making a Murderer about Stephen Avery? If you have, you're going to want to listen to what Kevin Cadora has to say about that right after this. Truth Radio, gang. We'll be right back.